One of the questions that the Chicago Bulls had going into the offseason has somewhat been answered, as Lonzo Ball has elected to pick up his $21.4 million player option moving into next season. In this video, we're going to be talking about what this means for Lonzo Ball and what this means for the Chicago Bulls and how they could possibly pivot with this decision that Lonzo Ball has made to pick up his contract. This is Rico Greenhowe. This is another episode of Bulls Digest. And before we jump into it, I want to let you know that 84.6% of you guys that watch the videos are not subscribed to the channel. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with your latest news and happenings of your Chicago Bulls. Without further ado, guys, let's jump into the first part of this video, which is Lonzo picks up his player option, guys. And so this is big. This is huge for the Chicago Bulls because essentially now this takes off the fact that the Chicago Bulls could look to say, hey, we could maybe medically retire Lonzo Ball. And this is going to be talked about in this article, which you can find in Yahoo Sports in a great article it was. We're going to be breaking down what it had to say about the injury timeline, what our president of basketball operations had to say, and what the outlook is looking like for the Chicago Bulls. So let's go ahead and jump into the article and what it had to say here. So Bulls Lonzo Ball picks up a $21.4 million option for the 24-25 season amid knee concerns. Ball hasn't played a game for Chicago since 2022. All right, Ball picked up the $21.4 million player option on his contract for next season, according to Woj here. Despite the decision, Chicago does not yet know if Ball will be able to play on a left knee that has undergone 3 surgeries in 2 years. In March 2023, he had a cartilage transplant procedure on the knee after a torn meniscus in January 2022. If Ball were unable to return and his knee injury was determined to be career-ending, the Bulls would be able to subtract that $21.4 million figure from their salary cap and luxury tax. However, if Ball continues his effort to return and doesn't get on the court, he takes a significant chunk of Chicago's cap for the 24-25 season as the team attempts to possibly resign DeMar DeRozan, Patrick Williams, that could also be making Zach Lavine an even higher priority as far as trading him. Here's what the president of basketball operations had to say. We're going to wait and see his progression the next couple of months after the team's season ended. He's progressing well. Everything is looking good with no setbacks. So we'll see where he's at in a couple of months. Karnisovas made his remarks after a reporter mentioned that LeVar Ball, Lonzo's father, said in an early April that it would be about 4 to 5 months before he could play 5-on-5 full contact basketball. And lastly, guys, Ball turns 27 in October. He signed a 4-year, $85 million contract with the Bulls as part of a sign and trade deal with the New Orleans Pelicans in 2021. In his only active season for Chicago, Ball averaged 13 points a game, 5.4 rebounds and 5.1 assists with 1.8 steals while shooting 42% on three-pointers, yet he played in only 35 games. For his career, which includes 2 seasons each with the Los Angeles Lakers and the Pelicans, Ball has averaged 11.9 points, 5.7 rebounds, 6.2 assists, and 1.6 steals per game. He was the Lakers' first-round pick. He was number 2 overall in 2017 out of UCLA. All right, guys, so a lot to unpack in this particular article. So first and foremost, I think that the first piece of critical information is that he is going to take up a large chunk of salary moving into next season. And it looks like the medical retirement plan is essentially going to be off the table as Lonzo Ball continues to ramp up his activity. So that's the first key piece of information here. And I love the fact that it talks about what this means as an impact on the Chicago Bulls, because now it's going to make the Chicago Bulls question what they're going to do with DeMar DeRozan and Patrick Williams even more, including what this means for this trade with Zach Lavine. I think that this is very, very important. Now, the Chicago Bulls are in a wait and see situation. Now, this is something that is not new to us. This is something that, in fact, LeVar Ball, his father, had come out and said that, yes, I mean, it looks like everything is progressing well. It's lining up with the Chicago Bulls medical staff, and they're saying the same thing. So I think everybody is on the same page. And I think that, essentially Chicago was in a situation where they were going to have to wait and see no matter what is going to take place. Because I think to try to trade Lonzo Ball right now, the value is certainly not going to be there. You have to see exactly what Lonzo Ball is going to be able to do before you even start to consider those things. However, regardless of what happens to Lonzo Ball, I think the Chicago Bulls can make some decisions that can put themselves in a favorable situation, even though he is going to take up a large chunk of the salary. All right, so that leads me to the next part of the video here, which is Lonzo picks up the player option. That was the first part of the video. But the next part is what's next for the Bulls. So, what's next for the Bulls here is that I think Chicago, they have to pivot in free agency, number one. All right. I think that one of our major issues is that I think that if Lonzo were to come back, Lonzo is going to have to come off the bench. I just think that with the way that Kobe White has played, the way that Ayo Dosunmu has played as well, I'm not sure that they can go back to the bench for Lonzo Ball, who, in my opinion, I think if he comes back from this injury, we're looking at a Lonzo Ball that is not going to quite be able to do what he was able to do in the past. All right. And so when you look at this cartilage replacement, I kind of looked it up a little bit more, and no, I'm not an expert here, but that essentially means that you're taking healthy cartilage and you're putting it into an area where there's the damaged cartilage, which is his knee. The issue, and this is also referring to the early part of this article, is that he has had some torn meniscus and some knee injuries before, prior to him getting to us. All right. And that's dealing with injuries that he had with the Lakers and the Pelicans. So, he already could have been having some damages, occurring on this knee. And this could have been a major breaking point here. Now, the issue about this is that you don't know what's going to happen in the long term. The short term, it may look pretty good. It's almost a lot like kind of a microfracture procedure where in the short term, it looks good, but the long term, it may not necessarily look as good as you would want it to be. And it really scares me, the fact that Lonzo is a guy that is predicated off of speed. Yes, his jump shot has gotten extremely better. Yes, he has vision that is a lot like a Jason Kidd. I think that that's fair to say. Like, he can certainly find people on the go. He makes the game a lot easier for you, but that is predicated on the fact that he is getting a little bit of separation. All right. And so I'm not sure he's going to be able to separate the way he used to. And I'm hoping that he can come back and be along the lines of a Sean Livingston type of player, where he can make one initial move and then he can, either score it or make that decision. I don't think he's in a situation where he's going to be able to come back and be able to put a series of 2 or 3 moves together, break some guys down, and then kind of distribute or take his shot. Like, I think that those days might be out the window. So what the Chicago Bulls are going to have to say is that, okay, look, if he's coming off the bench, perfect. That's great if we can get what we can get off the bench. But if he's coming off the bench and he's not anywhere near himself, or he becomes injured, or we end up deciding to go ahead and trade him, I think the Chicago Bulls should go ahead and first pivot by finding a guy that could strengthen that bench and take that load away from Lonzo if he can't do what we need him to do off the bench. And one of my main suggestions here is that you go with a guy that has been in the 6th Man of the Year award mentions And I think that it starts with Malik Monk. I think that Malik Monk is a guy that when you look at his contract, I think he had a 2-year, $20 million deal, I think, with the Sacramento Kings. I know he's going to probably command a little bit of money here going into the offseason, but I think this is a guy that is kind of flying under the radar because there are teams out there that are looking to fill in their max spot, and I don't know if they're necessarily looking for a rotational player. Now, why am I saying that we could start with a rotational player here? Because number one, I think financially it can work out for us. If we decide to do this, it doesn't tie up a whole bunch of cap, and I think it puts us in a situation where we can be elite off the bench, and we can go ahead and start to stretch the floor with the three-pointer. And if something happens to any of our other players that are starting, we at least have a backup plan here. So I think that that's number one. You start there. All right. And so with that being said, if we go with something that starts well off the bench and we don't have to worry about a guy like Lonzo Ball, I think we can address the height in the draft. You know, I talked about the fact that you have Donovan Clegan coming out of UConn. You have a guy like Zach Edey coming out of Purdue, who I think the Chicago Bulls should strongly take a look at. We also love Andre Drummond. I think that if we were to do this and we were to pivot and get a guy like Malik Monk for our bench, now we can focus and say, hey, let's bring back Andre Drummond and let's focus on doing something that I think the Chicago Bulls are not really linked to doing this offseason, and that's trading Vucevic. All right, that's trading Vucevic with Lavine and getting rotational players. And I think that this situation means that if DeMar DeRozan really loves us, like he says he loves us, and he wants to stay, I think that there is room for the Chicago Bulls management to go up to DeMar DeRozan and say, look, we can get some pieces to go with you guys that can take you out of this play-in situation that also keeps you young enough and relevant enough to stretch out for the next 5 to 10 years to play some winning basketball. But are you willing to take a little bit of a hit as far as the salary is concerned to go ahead and make this happen? I think DeMar DeRozan would be willing to do so. I think he likes the group. I think he is the most likely Chicago Bull to stay. And I think that this would be a solution for our height. I think this would be a solution to get rid of Vooch. And I think that this would take a lot of pressure off of us as far as moving Lavine for a star, so to speak. We can go out there and we can get some pieces that can be rotational, and we can also get a salary dump situation, which I think is going to be far easier to do than go out here and to try to bring a star type of player back that more than likely is going to eat up a lot of our salary cap here. So, to close off this video, the last couple things to look at is this. I mentioned Malik Monk and what this means, and I just talked about what Lonzo is doing as far as his numbers are concerned. When you look at the points per game and you look at what Malik Monk brings to the table, I mean, he's essentially bringing 13 points a game, and he's also bringing over almost about 4 to 5 assists per game. You notice that he actually had a jump from 2023 to the 24 season to 5 assists a game, which you love that about Malik Monk, which means that even for a guy that likes to score the basketball the way he does, he will distribute the ball at a high level. And I love the fact that he is a guy that will stretch the three-point line, or at least give us a little bit more of a three-point threat. So I love that about Malik Monk. So I think that this is a guy that we should take a look at, along with a guy like Kelly Oubre, who's out there. You have guys like Taurean Prince, Kyle Anderson. Now, this is saying that the Chicago Bulls are going to make some moves that get us into some good situations. I know we have Patrick Williams hanging out there as well, and this would mean probably that we would move on from Patrick Williams if we were going to do stuff like this. Lastly, this is what I want to leave you guys with Lonzo Ball. All right, and so this stems off of what his father said before he said the timeline of the 4 to 5 months, and he talked about the Rudy Poo workouts and the shoes that these guys wore that probably led to some injuries. Lonzo has only played in 56% of his games, and his brothers missed 44% of his games. So this is something this is why I think what I'm saying makes sense for the Chicago Bulls. They have to pivot as if Lonzo Ball is not going to be there. All right. The wait and see method of like, hey, we're waiting to see Lonzo Ball get back and be at full strength. Like, I think that those days are over. Chicago has to be proactive. If Chicago is not proactive, they're going to find themselves doing the same thing that they did over the last couple seasons, which is essentially putting us into the play-in situation. If they want to shake it up and they want to still stay relevant and build, they're going to have to go out here. They're going to have to shore up the bench. They're going to have to get some shooters. They're going to have to get some height. And I think that these are some ways that they can possibly do it and not have to depend on Lonzo Ball. And also, too, I will say this. If you bring a guy like Malik Monk over, here's a guy that played with De'Aaron Fox. The Kings like to run, and that's where we were very successful with Lonzo Ball. We were running. So this is a fit that I think is seamless for us, and he will not take away from Kobe White and Dosunmu. So, guys, what do you guys think in the comments? Should we go after a guy like Malik Monk in free agency, who I think is going to be undervalued, in my opinion? Do you feel like we should still go out in the draft and pick up one of these big guys like Zach Edey and Clegan from UConn? Do you feel like, bringing Andre Drummond back in the fold is going to be a great situation? And lastly, a lot of people have talked about Lavine being moved. Guys, do you feel like we could somehow get Vooch out of there as well? And do you think that DeMar DeRozan should still be with us as a closer? This is Rico Greenhowe. This is Bulls Digest. And as usual, go Bulls, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.